But for people who are new to kind of the Awaken movement and the Waking Up, and they haven't heard who Michael Tsarion is, can you give us a quick kind of bio of your background?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I've been doing this now for more years than I cared to mention, but it went more public in about 2000, and it was just mentors of mine in California. I'm from Ireland originally, but spent a lot of years in America, and sort of accidentally, got into these alternative subjects back in 89, 90, and 91, 92. These were when I first came across this information. Of course, you remember at that time it was centered around another war, a Desert Storm, the Bush administration.
Yeah.
George Herbert Walker Bush and the whole Desert Storm thing. And I came across a lot of, conspiracy material that corroborated what I had learned, which wasn't very much in the 80s, but it was enough to get me started. And then getting more and more affiliated with different groups and picking up books and magazines and underground zines, just started to get really, really fascinated with all of this material. A lot of it, I had my family anyway had a background in the New Age movement stretching back to the 70s. Not that I was an active member, but we knew people. We knew a lot of organizations. My grandfather and mother were heavily involved in it. And so there was a certain amount of interest in that, although I subsequently, found that it wasn't right for me, the ideologies, but the conspiracy stuff was more interesting, especially because it was interested in looking at the sort of criminal history of mankind, and that's what we'll be talking about today. And slowly, my studies continued, but as I said, it wasn't until about 2000, which through then original websites, I have many, many websites on all different kinds of subjects, but the first websites were sort of put out around, I think it was 98, 99, 2000, then a lot of people liked my message. So surprising to me, because I had no intention of doing interviews or, becoming public. This was just a hobby, and I liked being in the background, and I liked sitting in the audience and listening to, other speakers and trying hard to digest their work, which I found, difficult. There's a lot of tentacles, as you know, to this subject. There's a lot of different voices, a lot of different opinions. Some are pessimistic, some are optimistic, some are scientific, others are more spiritual. So it took an immense task, and then you have your favorites. For me, I had my favorites as well. You start relating and studying people that you think, just make it that much more clear. These are people like Lieutenant Colonel James Bo Greitz for me, and Eustace Mullins and G. Edward Griffin, and Myron Fagan, and then a lot of people even like the Reverend Jack Moore on the Christian side, and Tex Mars, and people like that, Nord Davis, a certain amount, and so many fine thinkers and writers on the Christian side, then moving more like Lyndon LaRouche's group, Dope Incorporated, so you have your favorites coming from Britain. See, like us, right? You and I, we're from Britain, so we know maybe a lot more about the old world history than a lot of the people who are into this subject do in America. They know the American side of it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was interesting because I knew European history, British history, and so when I start reading the Lyndon LaRouches and those people who had their eye on the European side of this, it made a lot of sense. Whereas to Americans, they wouldn't really know, is this really kosher? Is this really true? But I would be telling them, no, this is true. What you're reading here is really accurate. This is, I grew up in England and Ireland and Britain, I know this, what they're saying here is really accurate. So for me, you could not find this information in Britain, but you could find it, fairly easily, reasonably easily with the publishers and the conventions and the books and the magazines, and then later on with the internet, So I had amassed a lot of interest and had no intention of becoming, be on the public stage or anything like that, until other mentors who liked my particular slant. They liked the Irish stuff that I was bringing in, the ancient Celts and the pre-Celts. And so one thing led to another, and then they sort of kicked me out, into the deep end. And there I was, stuck having to do conferences and whatever. And that, from that point on, had more of a media persona. And from the 2000, I've been going on, it's now 2014, so it was about 14 years actively in the public eye doing this. I've written many books, have several websites, and people are willing to check it all out, And as I always believe, it's an ongoing research. It's an ongoing research. No one person is an expert in it.
Yeah.
Each and every, it's a form of awakening, really, like you said in the introduction. Each person jumping in there to find out, like I did, and not to do it with any specific goal in mind, just for the love of it, to research these things and find out what's been going on this planet and see what we can do about it.
Well, that's it. That's exactly what it is. And as we've said before on the show, everybody is on a path of knowledge. Some people are further down the road. So, and it's just a case of taking your time. And as you said, there's certain areas that you have an interest in, and you went down that rabbit hole to go and investigate that information, find out what's going on. And the rabbit hole does go very deep in a lot of areas involved with the alternative media and what's going on with the actual cabal and the history, the whole history of it. Now, obviously, you feel that there's an awful lot of things going on now. We've had a number of guests coming on saying there's definitely a shift going on, a shift of energy. A new paradigm has taken place. Some people are positive about it, some guests were negative about it, and it's interesting to get their opinions on it. How do you feel things are going at the moment? Obviously, it's been a while since we've had you on, and you've probably come across loads more information since then. So, as you said, we call this kind of the dying conspiracy, and we're moving away from the old paradigm. What way do you think it's going to go? Where do you think it's going, and what do you think is happening?
Well, I do think that there is something going on in the upper echelons. I've been studying this, as I say, for years, and I do believe that the original age-old monolithic global conspiracy has been going through many changes. It's almost like a leg gives out here, an arm gives out there. The thing is becoming decrepit. And, I call it dying conspiracy as opposed to dead conspiracy, because let's be under no illusion, it's not dead yet. And it's even in its dying throes, right? This is like something where you cut off the head of a serpent. It doesn't immediately die. It's thrashing about in all directions and can cause even more damage in its death throes. So one has to look at it quite pessimistically in one level, because even though it is certainly dying, going through a major change, there can also be repercussions. This thing can do a lot of damage. It's thrashing around, and I'll explain more what I mean by that later on as we go point by point through what this death means and even why this kind of death is happening, right? But I would start out just by saying, let's first realize that some good progress has been made on the optimistic side for the world to even start realizing there is a conspiracy, or there has been one. So before we even talk about its sort of new epochal changes that are taking place, we've done since 9/11. Personally, I would date it from before that, but from 9/11, with take us all together, all the people who've had podcasts, written books, the whole from A to Z. That's quite a formidable force of people who have been inspired to do something about this and bring it to the public attention, right? So I think that's kind of worked. I think it's been, very, very good. Because I think a lot of people now can no longer, this is the man on the street, they're still, not as informed as we would be, but I would say that they have less teeth when it comes to debunking or scoffing at any kind of concept of a conspiracy. A lot of people might not want to openly look you in the eye and admit it, but they have to, because of the work that's been done since, September 11th, 2001. There's been a great deal of evidence put forth. And I don't think it's as easy as it was in the 80s for your average Joe, to turn around and go, oh, what are you talking about? Sure, you're a crank. They can't do that anymore with any real, with any real meaning. We would win. We would win the conversation. Yeah. So the good news is, that there's less people who can scoff. And I think there's a lot more people, and of course, this includes intelligent people as well, who now take it for granted that there has been some sort of, conspiracy going on. They'll differ about how long it's been going, how global it is, how universal, blah, blah, blah. But, people know there's something going on. And you didn't have that in the 70s and the 80s. You certainly didn't have that, But crawling through the 90s slowly, now moving into the new millennium, I think a good many people realize, whether it's your pharmaceutical organizations or the psychiatric movement or the prison system or the economics of the world, they can see and, what's going on. Now, that's good. That's the stage one. That's what leads us to be optimistic. Now, on the other hand, I think that, I've been studying this so deeply for so many years that I've come to the belief, and it's just a belief. I mean, I may be completely wrong in this, but I do think that it's almost a situation in which, it's like Free Jack or something like that, where you go, or Blade Runner, you actually take the elevator to the top floor to the steering committee, headquarters, and you find that the guy's blown his brains out. There he is, he's decomposing at his desk. And you're like the minion, you're like the sort of henchman, and you're thinking, hey boss, what the hell's going on, And so the hierarchy has died off. The steering committee people of the past, and we can think here in terms of even, the Vatican controllers, the College of Cardinals. You asked earlier about, how this plugs into the Irish connection. Well, my God, this country's been one of the first victims of the conspiracy since about, the 1400s, possibly even before. And that's what I meant by the monolithic age-old conspiracy, which was, whether people like to accept it or not, has been administrated by a group I call the Atonists. But those Atonists in our history books can be identified as more the College of Cardinals, which are not necessarily the same thing as the Vatican or Roman Catholicism. This is a cult. This is what's known as the Roman Circle or the Roman cult, a very different species of criminal than what knee-jerk Roman Catholics might think when you're talking about this group. They have to admit, Roman Catholics will admit that mafia came out of Roman Catholic countries and that the IRA came out of Roman Catholic countries and many other terrorist organizations. Yeah, well, they're just going to bite down on it and admit that these College of Cardinals are members of that circle are extremely dark, evil people, and they run a massive global conspiracy, or they administrate for it. It's a many-headed beast. You know what I'm saying? So it's that particular organization that may be, now thrashing around. It's lost its head, and now we're moved into a different epoch. So it's like a rudder. You can imagine it like a big ocean liner that's got no rudder anymore. The captain is dead. What does it's like the captain of a pirate ship, for instance. If he dies off, he's kept a modicum of order, even though he is a pirate. But if he dies off, what do you think the rest of the crew are going to do? Their eyes all go to the treasure chests. Their eyes all go to the booty and the loot. And it won't be long before they're hacking at each other and grabbing all their worth, ladening themselves down. And so a certain amount of things that are happening in our modern world since the 70s, since the Reagan administration, there's different dates you can put on this, by the way. Each person listening to this can say, well, when did the head get chopped off? I think one important date, not the only one. I myself can't conclude when this actually happened, but I think that the death of, you remember Pope Paul II, who reigned only for about 33 days and then he was found dead?
Oh, that's Pope Paul I, is it?
That's right. Remember
that? He was poisoned, wasn't he?
That's right. So I look at that date as being very special. I think that this thing we're talking about, that could be one of the possible dates, because there was so much criminality going on in Vatican City at that time with the Banco dell'Ambrosia and all these deaths and assassinations and money grabbing, and then finally culminating in the death of an actual pope. And the man who was responsible for his death, a cardinal, a famous cardinal, is walking around free as a bird within the precinct of the Vatican while this event took place. The death certificate was never released. We don't have time to go right now into all those details, but I would just look at that particular instance. Another one would say, well, the Reagan era, there's certain things about the Reagan administration that make me think that, there was something going on. And then subsequently from that, he's an actor. The guy who follows that is nothing but a corporate criminal, the Bushes. These are numbskull people who only have nothing to do with the American people. They have no interest in that. They're self-serving. Next, you get some sort of profligate. You get some sort of, playboy in Clinton, a ludicrous selection for a prime minister, for a president. Then you get another nut and numbskull, in George W. Bush. And now you've got this creature that is just probably going to go down as the worst president in the history of the universe, let alone the planet. So, this all shows me that there's something very, very amiss, and that there's no real major control structure. There's a certain control structure, but as I said, it's the body of the serpent. It's different than actually having a brain anymore, And there's other things as well, like these money-grabbing fiascos, like the meltdown, in America, where, not just, the whole financial meltdown and the bailouts, that also shows me that something's wrong. Because don't forget that in that middle of that mix, in the middle of that meltdown, a lot of very unusually powerful groups like Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch and others crashed.